Welcome to the Book Nook podcast. Okay, so if this book we're talking about today has piqued your interest and you're thinking, hey, I want to dive into that world, you know what to do. We've got a handy link down in the description where you can snag a copy of Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros.
Now, we're about to embark on a deep, deep dive into Fourth Wing, a book that has, really taken the fantasy world by storm and captured the imaginations of so many readers. And what we're going to do is explore, what makes it so captivating, so compelling, drawing on a whole bunch of different perspectives, reactions, and reviews from, folks who have journeyed through its pages.
Yeah, it seems like this book, like you said, has really exploded in popularity. So for our listeners who might be wondering, what's all the hype about? We're going to break down those key elements that have, resonated with readers. And we're going to do that by looking at different viewpoints so that you can get a really well-rounded picture of, what this book is all about.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So let's kick things off with those first impressions and try to figure out where this book fits, in the broader literary landscape. One reviewer, actually, from the Berkeley Fiction Review, shared their experience of, kind of coming back to young adult fantasy with Fourth Wing. And what really grabbed them right off the bat was that eye-catching cover and that central idea, that premise of a war college specifically for dragon riders. I mean, come on, that's pretty cool, right?
Oh, yeah, it's super intriguing. And it seems like a lot of readers, coming into this book already had some pretty high expectations. The reviewer from What is Quinn Reading actually specifically mentioned the buzz, all the hype surrounding Fourth Wing, and also, importantly, the recommendations coming from, Sarah J. Maas fans. So for those familiar with her work, that sets a certain tone, right? It creates expectations for epic fantasy with, maybe some strong romantic elements woven in.
Absolutely. And that leads us to, the genre blend that we're dealing with here. The YouTube reviewer from Vicky Doe's blog kind of nails it down as a fusion, a blend of fantasy and romance. But they felt that the balance tipped, slightly more towards the fantasy side while still offering what they called some spicy romantic content. They even rated it, 2 out of 5 on their heat scale.
Mm-hmm.
So, you get that romantic tension, that spark, but the real core of the story is rooted in this fantastical world and the conflicts that unfold within it.
What I found super interesting, though, was the Literature Science Alliance YouTube reviewers comparison. I mean, they described it as a CW soap opera, right? But
Right.
if it was a book about, dragons and their writers in this weird school. And what's fascinating about that, I think, is that it highlights the dramatic, over-the-top elements, maybe even some, kind of melodramatic tropes that can be, surprisingly engaging, particularly for certain readers. It suggests, a story that's not afraid to really lean into those big emotions and, those dramatic twists and turns.
For sure. And speaking of twists and turns, let's delve into the heart of the story, the plot, and the setting, right?
Yeah.
The central premise is, immediately high stakes. You got Violet Torringale entering Basgith War College, and the basic challenge is bond with the dragon or, face almost certain death. I mean, it's bond or die right from the get-go, which creates this instant tension. You're hooked right away.
Exactly. And to make things even more intense, there's Violet's background. She's the daughter of a commanding general. So she's not exactly flying under the radar,
Yeah.
And that puts her in a really precarious position right from the start. Plus, you have the whole structured setting of this, academy with its scribe quadrant, its infantry, its healers, and the, coveted writer quadrant. So, all these divisions, all this potential for conflict and rivalry, it's all baked in.
Yeah, and you're actually right. I mean, reviewers, across the board, they really highlighted how this confined setting of the college actually, it heightens the tension. It's a world where danger is lurking everywhere, and the stakes are so personal, so immediate for these young cadets. It's like every decision could be their last.
It's true. And that pressure to succeed, that whole graduate or die mentality, which one reviewer jokingly compared to the stress of college finals, which, let's be honest, can be pretty intense. But in this case, it's literally life or death, right? It underscores the weight of the consequences that these characters are facing every single day.
No kidding. Okay, so let's shift gears a bit and talk about the characters and the relationships, the dynamics between them. Violet's journey, her personal arc, is really at the heart of it all. I mean, initially she was meant for the scribe quadrant, right?
Oh.
The quieter, less dangerous path. But circumstances, they kind of throw her into the the thick of it into this deadly writer program, and her development, the way she finds strength, not necessarily through brute force, but through, intellect, resilience, and her ability to adapt. It's really compelling to follow.
And then, of course, there's the romance, right? Her connection with Xaden Ryerson. And I think we have to acknowledge, the enemies to lovers trope, it's a classic for a reason. People love it. And the way it's implemented here with their dragons being mated, which creates that telepathic bond, that mutual reliance between them, it just, amps up the intimacy and the complexity of their relationship. It adds like another layer, another dimension to their connection.
Right. But it's also worth noting that, not every reader was equally invested in the romance. Some folks, they really connected with other aspects of the story. Like one commenter on the Berkeley Fiction review, they mentioned that they actually found the friendships in the book, the bonds between the characters outside of the romantic pairing, more compelling. And that just goes to show you, right, different strokes for different folks. Different readers connect with different elements of the story.
Absolutely. And speaking of character archetypes, Xaden, he definitely embodies that classic broody, dark-haired mentor figure, right? We see that in so much popular fantasy. And Violet, with, her bond to this incredibly powerful dragon and her distinctive appearance, that silver hair, she fits that mold of a chosen one type character, someone who's destined for greatness, for something extraordinary.
Yeah, for sure. And we can't forget about the dragons themselves. They seem to be a real highlight for a lot of readers. The Becky Doe's blog reviewer, they were like gushing over them. They praised the dragons as feeling, truly real boisterous, independent, intelligent, and obviously powerful. And they really liked how the communication, the bond between the humans and the dragons felt authentic, believable. And the key point they made is that the humans don't really control the dragons. It's not like a master-pet relationship. It's a partnership built on respect and mutual understanding.
That's a great point. They're not just, pets with wings. They're these powerful, sentient beings with, their own agendas, their own thoughts and feelings. And it sounds like Rebecca Yarros isn't afraid to create a world where, where characters can die. You'll find yourself attached to characters, both good and bad, and where no one is truly safe. That willingness to kill off characters, it definitely raises the stakes and makes the story that much more intense.
It certainly does. So moving on, let's talk about, the writing style and the world building, how this world is crafted. And here we see a bit of a range of opinions. Some folks loved it. Some had a few critiques. The Berkeley Fiction review, for example, they mentioned that while they found the story super engaging, they didn't necessarily think the writing itself was like groundbreaking or super nuanced. They pointed to, some examples of Violet's inner thoughts as kind of falling a little flat for them.
Yeah. And the What is Quinn Reading reviewer, they also pointed out, some instances where they felt the plot relied on convenience a bit too much. And they also mentioned the chosen one trope, which we already talked about. However, it seems like what really overrides these criticisms, at least for many readers, is the sheer addictiveness of the plot. It's consistently described as like a page turner, a fast-paced blast that keeps you hooked and wanting more.
Exactly. And the world building, it's generally described as being quite detailed and intricate. The author clearly put a lot of thought into the different territories, the continents, and the whole structure and organization of the academy. But the Becky D's blog reviewer, they did mention that they felt like it got to be a bit much in the sequel, like maybe it was a bit overloaded with details. And the Literature Science Alliance reviewer, they have a funny take on it. They said that the world building might not make perfect sense if you scrutinize it too closely. But, they also said that it didn't really take away from their enjoyment of the story's overall drama and, kind of campy feel.
It seems like the readability of the writing style is a big plus. Like a lot of reviewers commented on how easy it was to read, how it just, flowed really well and allowed them to get fully immersed in the story without any, unnecessary hurdles. But the Literature Science Alliance reviewer, they did raise a point about the names used in the world building. They suggested that some of them might feel a bit uninspired or potentially like they were drawn from certain cultures without, a truly deep level of engagement or understanding.
Hey, if you're finding this, exploration of Fourth Wing as fascinating as we are, we'd love for you to subscribe to the Book Nook podcast so you don't miss out on any of our future deep dives into, other captivating books and literary worlds. And if you've already ventured into the world of Fourth Wing, we'd love to hear your thoughts. So feel free to leave a review and share your perspective with other listeners.
Absolutely. And let's talk about the emotional impact of this book. It seems like for many readers, it really evoked a sense of nostalgia, like taking them back to those earlier fantasy reading experiences. It's described as, both brutal and emotionally turbulent, like a real roller coaster of feelings. The Becky Doe's blog reviewer even joked about needing a therapy session afterwards, which, gives you a sense of the intensity that some readers felt while reading it.
It's true. It's definitely an emotionally charged book.
Mm.
But despite that intensity, despite that emotional roller coaster, there's also this sense that it doesn't, you know, take itself too seriously. There's a lightness, an element of fun amidst all the high stakes and drama. And it seems like the target audience is pretty broad. It could appeal to both young adult and adult fantasy readers.
Mhm.
Some reviewers even drew parallels to, like, the engaging style of the Hunger Games, which, I mean, if you enjoyed that, you might really connect with Fourth Wing.
Yeah, and the balance between the fantasy elements and the romance, it seems like that's a really key ingredient in its success. Neither genre overpowers the other. They work together, in harmony to create this really compelling narrative. And the ending, it sounds like it packs a punch. One reviewer mentioned like gasping out loud at the plot twist. And, that kind of reaction, it makes you want to immediately grab the next book in the series and see what happens next.
Oh yeah, that cliffhanger ending, it's definitely effective. The Literature Science Alliance reviewer, they summed up their experience as, a thoroughly entertaining, soapy, melodramatic time. Their words, not mine. And they emphasized how much they enjoyed the story, even with,
Wow.
any perceived inconsistencies or plot holes. So, it's really about embracing that escapism, that traumatic, over-the-top kind of fun, even if it's not, perfectly polished.
So, taking everything into account, all the reviews, the reactions, the discussions, it's clear that Fourth Wing, despite any, minor criticisms, is overwhelmingly recommended as a truly enjoyable and immersive read. Especially, if you're a fan of dragons, compelling romance, and a plot that just, keeps you on the edge of your seat. It seems like it delivers on those fronts.
Yeah, it definitely does. The Literature Science Alliance folks,
Yeah.
they concluded that it's, simply a good time,
Mhm.
especially for readers who enjoy, that kind of dramatic, maybe even a little toxic romantic entanglement
Mhm.
and who aren't, too bothered if the world building isn't like perfectly logical or super deep. And the Becky Doe's blog reviewer, they gave it a very enthusiastic, worth the hype endorsement. So, take that for what it's worth.
So to wrap up our deep dive into this, fiery dragon-filled world of Fourth Wing, it seems like the main takeaway is this. It's a hugely popular fantasy romance novel that delivers on those core promises, right? You've got thrilling dragon action, a dramatic academy setting full of peril and challenges, and a genuinely engaging plot that keeps you hooked, even if some readers might find, certain elements of the writing or the world building, not perfect. But ultimately, its strength lies in its ability to transport readers, to provide a truly entertaining escape through its fast pace and that appealing blend of genres.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the question for you, dear listener, is, does this particular combination of elements, does it align with what you're looking for in a fantasy novel? Do you crave high stakes adventures, with a strong romantic thread woven through it? And are you okay with, maybe the prose not being super intricate or the world building not being, completely airtight? If so, then Fourth Wing might just be the captivating read that you've been searching for.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And with that, we come to the end of our deep dive into Fourth Wing. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Book Nook podcast. We hope you found this exploration insightful and, maybe even sparked your interest in checking out the book for yourself. And before you go, we'd love for you to, subscribe to the podcast for more in-depth looks at, all sorts of fascinating books and literary discussions. And if you have a moment, we'd be so grateful if you could leave a review. It helps other listeners find us, and it helps us know what you're enjoying.
And as always, you can find a link down in the description to purchase a copy of Fourth Wing and, embark on your own adventure into this exciting world.
Thanks again for listening to the Book Nook podcast. Be sure to check the link in the description to get your copy of Fourth Wing.